What one mistake ended your career? Not exactly a career, but I worked in a fast food spot that didn't have any air conditioning. And there's a workers' law where I live that states once it gets to a certain temp in the building, they legally can't stay open. I brought a thermometer to work. I sided with the peeps under me as their manager. Didn't happen to me. But I remember a co-worker of mine getting fired because he put laxatives in his own lunch bag. Some dickhead kept stealing parts of our lunches. Turned out, it was our supervisor. I was opening my packages in the mailroom, using a pocket knife to slice open the package tape. Secretary came in and chatted. We're both Italian, so we gesture a lot while talking. Sometime after the conversation, the ops manager came down from his office and escorted me out of the building. Had forgotten the knife in my hand while talking with the secretary, and she made an accusation that I had threatened her with it during our conversation. Was fired 3 days later. I had worked with this woman for almost a decade. Helped her children with their homework, etc. Years later I learned corporate wanted to take down my boss, and started the process by going after his biggest supporters. I was the third domino to fall. After I was railroaded, almost 40% of the branch's staff left the company. I guess the secretary was in on it, and leapt at any excuse to take me out. Shame. Really loved that job, and got fired when my first child was due in only 4 weeks. Was very demoralizing for quite a while. Not me, but my best friend. He found a stash of porn on a network computer that belonged to the boss. Then showed it to everyone. Ended up working in a supermarket after that. And said half the people there had criminal records. Kind of the opposite. I worked at a second-hand electronics store. A dude came in with a PS2 to sell. I noticed the serial number was scratched off and thought that was a concern, but processed it anyway. It went through testing, came back greenlit, and I assumed that meant that it was okay. Assumed wrong. Management sacked my ass an hour later. Went home. Re-evaluated my life choices. And that year went back to college. Got my A-levels. Then my degree. And now I've been a software engineer for almost 10 years. I was involved with the secretary. We thought we were both discreet. But everyone knew. Edit. To clarify, we had a policy that said co-workers cannot engage in relationships. We broke the rules. I hated the place and took all the blame. Yo, keep her from getting canned too. It wasn't a full-blown relationship yet. We were just starting out. Also, that's all people did was gossip about stuff that was none of their business. One of the directors wasn't happy with some work I'd done. Started poking me hard with his finger to punctuate his comments. I punctuated back considerably more forcefully. I did a PhD, now I can't get hired anywhere. Lifting wrong, 14 years of arboriculture coming to an end now. Not sure of the next job. Call center taking a manager call. Put the chap on hold and comforted the team member. He is a bit of an asshole, isn't he? Forgot to also put the call on mute and he requested a call recording. Whoops. Then while on suspension, I broke my leg, and went to my hearing after far too little sleep and too much tramadol. When they asked me what the impact of my actions was, I said it was crippling. Far too pleased with that pun to give a fuck about the outcome. Spent the next few months coasting through bills selling bits and bats. Eventually got into marketing. A win in the long run. I sent a scathing email about my boss directly to my boss. It wasn't meant for him. To this day I still have no idea what possessed me to put his name in the address bar. I noticed his name the exact moment I hit send. You have never felt that much panic. I worked in public relations agencies for quite a long time. And mostly hated every minute of it. I didn't really understand what I was doing. But felt trapped in the business because I couldn't think of anything else I'd be able to do. I got into it because around 2005 to 2010 social media was just becoming a big thing and old-school PR agencies would hire anybody who knew anything about Twitter, Facebook and all these exciting new channels. Pretty much all I had to do was show up to meetings and enthusiastically explain what social media was to confused old business dinosaurs. So even though I knew nothing about PR and didn't really understand how agencies work, I quickly got over-promoted and for the first time in my life found I was in high demand. So I was getting paid more money than ever before. However, eventually social wasn't seen as such a big deal anymore. So I found myself just trying to do whatever work they threw at me, hoping I could keep hold of that sweet salary for a little longer. But because I wasn't into the job at all, I was always procrastinating, and I'd pull late nights to get work done at the last minute. One day my boss asked to see my progress on a big client presentation that wasn't due for another week. I literally hadn't done a single thing on it. And I tried to bluster my way out of it. But the shit hit the fan and I got fired. Overnight I found I could no longer get interviews at agencies that used to be desperate for social media experts to work for them, and really started to worry about how I'd find another job. In the end it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Because out of desperation I took a temporary 3-month contract to do some basic marketing stuff at a small tech company, and before my contract expired the company got bought by a bigger company. They decided they needed a marketing director for my region. And because I was sitting in the right chair at the time, I got promoted and given a permanent contract. I was given plenty of time and space to figure out how to do the job as the company grew. So I felt much more comfortable in the role. Not like I was constantly making it up as I went along. Been there 7 years. Love the job and the people. And earn more money than I ever thought I would. A guy the first worked with was caught stealing 2 cigarettes from a colleague's bag. Was on a 6-figure salary. Not anymore. Had a workplace accident, fall from height. Didn't get fired but broke enough bones that I'll never work in that industry again. Sent an email to someone I thought was helping me, threw me under the bus. Browsing for another job while at the job. Called the HR lady the angel of death to a coworker on chat. HR was in a different state. So anytime they came to town we all knew it was most likely to lay off people. Angel of Death came to get me shortly after. Tears of joy, tears of joy. I was a part-time intern making $9 an hour. USD. And my boss asked if I had any plans for the weekend. I had said I was going to buy a new car. Very much old and used as that's what I could afford. And he asked if I was buying a brand new car. My response was that my budget isn't big enough for a new car, and a couple weeks later during my 1-year review my manager said they didn't have the work for me and that I was disrespectful for telling the boss I didn't make enough money. At the time I was living comfortably as a college student, just needed different transportation. I tried not to be disrespectful but apparently I was. Getting promoted to supervisor started the dominoes falling. I worked at a prison. I had been there for about 7 years and I knew I was most qualified. So I applied for the open sergeant's position. I got it. Which is where this story starts. As a sergeant, it was my job to do investigations and document the findings whenever an inmate alleged his life was in danger. I would do the investigation and do a report on my findings. And it would get sent to the warden for them to interpret the evidence and make a final decision. So, one day, an inmate gets beat up on a building I was in charge of. This inmate had never spoken to me, and had never told anyone he was having friction with his cellmate. Well, when questioned about it, the inmate said he had told me he needed to be moved and I told him I would. Initially, my supervisors believed him, but after I pulled up the surveillance camera that showed I had never even gotten down to that area that night due to being on a mission from another one of my supervisors all night, they admitted I hadn't talked to him. However, the higher-ups needed someone to blame, and because it was my area, I got the blame, and got fired. As a side note, I was salty about getting fired because I cared about my job, but I wouldn't go back if they begged me. I have a much better job now, and the prison is so short-staffed because of how they treat their people. The officers are stuck doing 16-hour days. 6 days a week. No thank you. Edit. Fuck it. What are they gonna do? This was the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.